Hey, how's it going? I hope everybody's well and safe. Sorry for the long wait on any more content. I'll try to get a little better at getting some stuff uploaded. So this will just be a basic walkthrough of removing the tank, safely disconnecting all the lines and relieving the fuel pressure. This started as just a project for me to replace the old tired fuel pump. Once I got underneath the car and just kind of was looking around the rear end, realized I just needed to go ahead and replace my entire rear end. So that's where I'm at, and hopefully coming up here in the near future I'll have some walkthroughs of that process and hopefully some more tutorials. Now before we do anything else, let's go ahead and relieve the pressure from the fuel system through the maintenance port on the driver's side of the fuel rail. That's it right there in the middle of the rags. Basically, you know, it's under pressure, so wear some glasses, be smart, cover anything that you don't want to get fuel on. Okay, now we can return to the rear of the car where we remove the driver's side rear wheel. There's this cover here that needs to come off. It's covering the line coming from the fuel tank and also the return fuel line. All right, here's a shot from the bottom. You've got the one plastic retainer clip, a 10mm bolt, another 10mm bolt over here, and also a plastic retainer clip. So while this is coming off, let me just say it did become quite the ordeal going to drop the fuel tank for a fuel pump and wind up removing the entire rear suspension and rear subframe. But it was definitely something that needed to be done. 30 years old, everything was pretty badly wore out, and it was something I was looking forward to doing, and it's looking pretty good. All right, here we have the drain plug on the back driver's side of the fuel tank. Use this to drain out any leftover fuel. Basically did try to run most of the gas out of the car and just use this to drain out the last little bit into a fuel can. If you can ahead of time, I definitely recommend hitting some of these things with penetrating oil. I did the day before, but I'm also following up with it as I move along. Right here I'm removing the spring clamps off of the fuel return line and the vent line. You're going to need to probably work those off with a wrench or a hose separator if you have one. Next, there is a flare nut just to the right of the hoses. You'll want to put a flare nut wrench on. I didn't have really too much trouble with this. Again, I had been soaking it for a couple days in penetrating oil. And as you can see, there is fuel coming out, so just have something handy, have some buckets, rags, and just be safe when you're disconnecting all these lines. Alright, next, after removing the flare nut, we're going to go ahead and remove this fitting bracket. This actually runs to the fuel pump on top of the gas tank. It's just two 10mm bolts, and just kind of leave that hanging. It'll come out with the fuel tank. Alright, next we're going to remove our fill line. You're just going to disconnect this one clamp right here and work the hose back off. You can leave the other end is connected to the fuel tank. Good idea to go ahead and place a rag in there, keep any debris or dirt from getting down inside the tank. And then there's just one more line that runs with your fill line. It's like a pressure relief or vent line that runs with it. Just go ahead and disconnect that spring clamp and back it out. Okay, so from inside the car, facing the rear just to the left, with the back seat down, you will see your fuel sending unit. Remove that cover, and then the harness coming out of it, there's a 3-pin connector that plugs in. Disconnect that. And then you'll see one other wire coming out of it. That is your ground. Just pull the seat back a little bit and remove that 10mm bolt. Then you're just going to push the wiring back through the hole on top of the fuel tank. Something I missed filming, there is a half of a fender lining along the driver's side wheel well. If you remove that, it'll make accessing these fill lines much easier. Now you want to go ahead and put a floor jack up under the tank to support it, and remove the two bolts for the straps towards the back. These actually, the brackets that they bolt into are have a nut welded to them, and they rusted out pretty badly on mine. This one that I'm doing right now, it actually spun the nut completely off the bracket, so I couldn't even get it off. Thankfully, I was removing the whole rear end anyways, because the only way to get to them to remove the brackets that these straps mount to is to remove the subframe, because the mounting bolt for the brackets is underneath the subframe. Anyways, you can see it's just spinning here. It takes me a minute to realize. Anyways, once I do, I'm able to get a screwdriver and kind of wedge it in between there and the nut and hold it still enough to back the bolt out. And was eventually able to get the straps down just so I could finish shooting this video. and later on removed the subframe and removed the bracket, cleaned it up, and welded a new nut to it. So definitely recommend a couple days prior to starting this, go ahead and get some penetrating oil up in there and get those soaking. Once these two bolts have been removed, you can push the straps down out of the way and go ahead and lower the tank. So at this point, if you've removed everything that I've shown, there is nothing left to hang the tank up as far as any lines or anything electrical. Just keep an eye on everything as you're lowering it down, and if anything gets snagged up, free it. Alright, so I didn't really get any good video of actually removing the fuel pump, the hanger unit, and installing the new Walbro. I do have some pictures, and I can give a little bit of a description of that as we move along for those that might need it. Right here to the right of the tank, you have your fuel level sending unit. Disconnect the harness from that. You shouldn't need to remove it unless you're replacing that. Okay, and right here we have the fuel pump hanging unit. We're going to disconnect everything off of this entirely and remove the 6 10mm nuts. There is also a gasket under here that will need to be replaced. This is just a little check valve for venting pressure in the tank. You can just set that aside. Alright, you'll want to go ahead and disconnect the plug from the unit. Next, go ahead and remove the banjo nut. Then go ahead and remove the clamp and disconnect the fuel return line. Now just remove the 6 10mm bolts from around the outside of the hanger assembly and remove the assembly from the tank. Alright, so here's the assembly out of the tank. Right here at the bottom you'll notice a little strainer. You're going to want to replace that, sort of a filter for the pump. Next, right here there's a little slot that the bottom of the pump slides into. There's also a rubber seat there. I was able to cut away at it and actually make that fit the Walbro pump. Okay, if you're using the same Walbro pump, it's going to be much different size and take some work to get it to fit right. Also, the wiring for the plug does not match. You'll need to cut this wiring. Then just solder the new plug on and use some weatherproof heat shrink to seal it all up good. So here's a shot of the old pump removed and the new Walbro pump that I put in. It's a model GSS342. It's a 255 liter per hour pump. Here's a shot of the pump after everything was done and it's installed and ready. So you might have noticed the tank was in pretty bad shape, covered in rust. I didn't even think I was going to be able to salvage the hanger, it was so bad. Anyways, I just gave it a real thorough washing, then went after it with sandpaper, some wire brushes, and was able to get rid of almost all the rust. The hanger actually turned out looking really, really good. I used a rust inhibitor on everything and then finished it off with a chassis paint. So the end result actually turned out better than I was expecting. I think the only thing better would be a brand new tank. And this one comes pretty close. Last thing, I'm not going to drop the tank ever again if I have to do anything with the fuel pump. So I went ahead and put the tank in, mocked it up for a cut, and cut an access port for it. Once it was cut, I went ahead and filed all the edges to make them smooth and safe. This is very dangerous with the jagged metal, do be careful. So you can see the tank under there, it's actually just sitting down on a jack to kind of just mock the position of the tank so I knew where to cut. I do have it completely sealed up. You'll want to make sure it's sealed so you don't get any shavings in it. Next you're going to need an access cover from a 92 to 2000 Civic EG. And you're going to have to reshape it a little bit in order to get it to conform. It's flat, but I took a rubber mallet, put it in the vise, and just kind of pushed it around the mallet until I got the right curvature. Did have to take it back and forth to the car for a couple test fits. Drilled the 4 holes for it, and perfect fit. And here it is, finished, installed, and something I'm definitely loving. The fact that I'll never have to drop the fuel tank again. Alright everybody, that pretty much does it for the tutorial of removing the fuel tank. I do want to show what I've got going on with the car, all the current projects, but I'll save those for some other videos, perhaps a walkthrough of just basically all the projects going on. As far as new tutorials, I'll have one for rebuilding the rear brake calipers, and also a battery relocation video coming up hopefully in the next week. I do get a lot of questions about how to do that properly, so look forward to that. I really appreciate all the support. It's pretty cool getting over 200 subscribers. I know that's like nothing on YouTube, but for me it was pretty cool. So I just really appreciate everybody tuning in and appreciate the support, and I will try to get more consistent with keeping some content coming and useful stuff. Alright, So everybody be safe, take care, and until next time.